I can hear you.
All right, perfect. So with that said, I would like to welcome everyone to the Wednesday, February 25th school committee special meeting, budget workshop number 2. I call the meeting to order at approximately 5:06 p.m. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. A brief moment of reflection, appreciation and gratitude for all those that have been working diligently this week to keep operations going in the town safe and proud. Excellent, thank you. Before I read my statement of purpose of the workshop, if you are watching this meeting on YouTube live stream, I would like to ask questions or join in discussions. You will have to join via the Zoom webinar. The link for the webinar can be found on a pop-up on the school's website. Click the Zoom link at the bottom of the pop-up link and the Zoom live will come up. And if you will be able to comment or we'll be able to cue them in. Was that correct, Tom?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you for making that modification. We know that it's challenging times with the historic blizzard that we had, but we thought it would be pertinent that if there was community members that wanted to chime in, they'd have the ability to do so. In terms of a statement of the purpose of this workshop, as always, the purpose of this budget workshop is to ensure that we're continuing our momentum in protecting outcomes and continued success for the school, while also being fiscally responsible to the stakeholders of Little Compton. This is our second workshop. We have had the groundwork laid by John McNamee, Rosemary, and Sean in the first workshop. And following this workshop, we will then vote on the approval of our submission of the budget to the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee then reviews all departments in which public input and meetings are held for feedback. And then ultimately, the Budget Committee makes a recommendation via a town mailer for the financial town meeting that'll be held later in May. I believe this year's date is May the 19th. So nothing is set in stone here today. It still goes before the review of the Budget Committee. And there is still public hearings to be had at that level prior to their recommendation being made. That said, we'll turn it over to John McNamee. Like another you, so you could. I just want to make sure you're.
John, you want me to present?
You have a printout. Perfect. Oh, Michael, trust me, we were not questioning your absence. We were actually thinking that you were in incredibly high demand. And thank you for your work, as everybody's work in getting us back to baseline. All right, John.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, so the budget as it stands right now, we have a town appropriation of an increase of 3%. So that gives us, we basically, last year's budget, we had 8,261,138. The 3% brings us to 8,508,972. That number has been put into the town budget at this point in time as a placeholder at the 3%. The Budget Committee has informed us that they were trying to hold expenses to 3% and looking at revenues probably increasing at a little bit over 4%. We should be close to that goal. We have a meeting tomorrow night with the town council, where they're going to put forward their budget, which would include the town appropriation for the schools at that point in time. And as we will vote on tonight, this budget goes then to the town, gets incorporated with their budgets and then goes over to the budget committee, which then does their due diligence and has their public meetings and so forth. So there are plenty of opportunities for the public to weigh in on all the town's budget by each department. So this is clearly not the final say on the budget, but it certainly is the recommendation of the committee to the budget committee, to the town, to the school committee, to the budget committee. So there's one change that I'd like to present from last week's meeting. So if you recall, we were basically looking at a roughly about $50,000 in a excess of expenditures over revenues on the proposed budget for FY27. And based on that, we were going to be using the capital to fund that shortfall, which would have been the 50,000. During this past 2 weeks, the pension report came in for the town, and the town's pension funding is required to be funded at $337,000 for next year. Of that 337, 65,000 of that is attributable to school employees. And what we wanted to do is bring that over onto the school side to kind of clean up any issues that you have with the school appropriation being basically what is voted on at the financial town meeting. Because basically what they were doing was funding this on top of the school appropriation, and basically that was historical. I think if we are going to be looking at some point, maybe not in the near future, but going forward at a charter school, I think it's best if we have all the expenditures sitting on the school side that need to be on the school side at this point. So that being said, by adding the $65,000 to the fringe benefits, that increases the excess of expenditures over revenues to 115,000, which I was proposing that we would fund out of capital, and I'm still looking at that now. But we did get some good news this past week that we're getting another distribution from the East Bay Educational Collaborative. As you know, that collaborative is being dissolved or has been dissolved. The building was sold. We wound up with a distribution of $250,000 at that point, which went into the capital to help us fund the capital projects. We're set to get another $100,000 within the next few weeks, so that what I'd like to do is utilize that 100,000 basically as the funding source for this shortfall. So when we do get that money, we put it over in the capital, and then basically utilize that money out of the capital fund, or we leave it in the general fund and it goes into our accumulated surplus. But either way, it's going to be monies that we can use to help shore up the excess of revenues over expenditures in the budget without having to dip into basically our accumulated surplus, because we're getting this windfall, which I think is key, because as everybody knows that in the past, that's basically what the town had been doing, and that has certainly since stopped in 2026 and will not be repeated in 27 as well too. So we're looking at a level funded budget being submitted to the budget committee from the town as well. So with that, and I think there are two handouts you had there, which I'd like to correct the dates. Well, no, the dates are fine on that. That's 2/26, 25/26. That last column on the the revenues and expenditure summaries. It starts off with the unaudited 2025. That's going to reflect basically total expenditures of 9,356,668, which leaves us with the shortfall of the 115. Basically, we will wind up either transferring the 115 from capital, depending how we account for that, or we basically will be using some of the accumulated surplus from prior years. So right now, based on, I've got most of the adjustments in for 25. The audit will take place sometime in the spring. The audit proposals, RFP has gone out. We should be selecting auditors sometime. I think we're going to meet, no, the proposal is going to be accepted at town council meeting on March 5th. The committee will meet a small committee, including myself, will meet to select the auditors from the proposals. And we're going to have probably a special town council meeting to appoint auditors on either March 10th or March 11th. So we'll get them on board with the idea that audit would be complete by the June 30th at the latest. Hopefully we would have a draft for the financial town meeting, but the final audit would be complete by June 30th, which will catch us up from that standpoint. As you know, we just received the 2024 audit, so that was well over a year past due. So we're trying to eliminate that. So I think with the addition of the EBEC money, it puts us in pretty good shape in terms of the funding for this proposed budget at that 9,350,668. I do have the so going back to the schedule, we're looking at an accumulated surplus of about $91,000 after assuming that we break even for 2026. And we're showing about an $87,000 loss in 25. So that's going to bring, plus the transfer to the capital of 300. So that's going to leave us with about $91,000 of accumulated surplus. So by adding the 100 to that, that would give us about 191,000. My thoughts are that the 191, especially in the school unrestricted funds, might be appropriate, especially in the event that we have any additional tuition for out-of-district students for special education, or we have enrollment blips that cause us to spend a little bit more on Portsmouth High School students based on, smaller class sizes leaving and larger class sizes coming in. So I think this just kind of protects us and kind of would allow us to be able to smooth that out by leaving the 100,000 in the unrestricted fund and funding the shortfall from capital. So if we look at the last handout that I gave you, which was the capital reserve fund, you can see under the FY27 budget column that we should be our expenditures, which would be about $250,000, would equal what we would bring in for housing aid. So we kind of be break even. So that's going to leave us with about 264,000 of accumulated fund balance. We take the 150 out, we'll show about 152,000 sitting into the capital account. So we'll have 152 over in capital. We'll have roughly about 191 sitting in our unrestricted funds. So I think that's a nice balance to have in terms of being able to fund this deficit budget out of the capital fund versus taking it out of the general fund.
Excellent. Michael, questions?
So John, I'm looking at this FY 27 budget and it says that net excess efficiency over revenues expenses. After that 115, it says 151, 838.
Yeah. Last page, John. Right, Mike?
Oh, on the last page, okay, Yeah.
Sorry, yep, I should have said that.
okay.
So I'm sorry, the numbers that you were just referring to, I guess we're gonna, just trying to follow you on this. You're saying that we're gonna have in the capital account, how much, please, after that transfer?
Yeah, so that line item should actually say, ending fund balance as of June 30th. Yeah, that line item should say, ending fund balance. So you start off with your excess, deficiency of expenditures, then you have your beginning fund balance, then any transfers, and that'll give you your ending fund balance as of June 30th. So that was my fault. I've got to change that line. So that's what that's going to wind up. So that 151, 838 on the 27 line is going to be our ending fund balance in the capital fund. The 28 amount obviously is going to be with spending, and again, these are kind of, I don't think we have anything planned as far as 28 goes, but we've got 200,000 sitting in there. We get 100,000 in revenue. That I take it down by 100. So at the end of 28, assuming no changes, we would wind up with about 51,838 of ending fund balance in the capital fund. But right now, the only projects that we have on the table are really the HVAC project at the school, and that's the $500,000 that would more than likely be completed, if not by the end of this current fiscal year. It may go into next fiscal year, but that's the only one that I think we've got engineered and
Yeah, that's the only one we have really.
on the table right now. Yeah.
Jen, just, I guess a couple, again, so that 151, 838, you're saying that that's the ending fund balance as of June 30th, and that's for the capital, the general, I'm sorry.
Capital.
That's capital. That's capital, Mike. Yeah, and that's for next year. That's for the budget year, ending 27.
So June 30th, 2027. And you speak to the 500,000 in FY 26, and how much, and you're doing a deduction for that, right?
Yeah.
Of that 500,000, how much are we gonna get back from the state on? No?
So that should be roughly with the library. We should be looking at that top line item on says FY 27 budget, which is 252.5.
The housing rate, yeah, okay.
That's the housing aid, yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
already reflected in your number for 27 of us getting that money back of the 500,000 that we'd be spending.
Right. I just completed the tax return. This Blizzard has been able me to get to that tax return. So I do have that right here. I've got to electronically file that, and that's going to get us, I think 168.2 is the number I have on the tax return. So that's pretty close to what we've got there. So I'd expect that to come in probably within 60 days after I file, because I am going to file that electronically.
And the plan on that 168 is accounted for already or not accounted for? As far as
That's in that projection, Mike. So if you look at my FY 26 projection, that's showing as revenue coming in the current year. So that's going to wind up being in the accumulated surplus of 264, 338 at the end of the year, and that's assuming we spend to the amount that we've got in there, which is on the HVAC, which is the 500,000. Some of that might carry over into the next fiscal year, but and that would be a cash flow issue, because I think we need to have things completed by the end of June in order to submit those for housing aid, so they have to be substantially complete. So I think if everything's ordered, I think we should be able to meet the completion date of June 30th for the HVAC.
Okay.
June 30th of this year, John.
Right. So they pay housing aid in the subsequent year. If it's under a certain amount, they pay the full amount. So in this case, I think it's if the project's under $1 million or $1.5 million, we get it all in 1 year. So we get it in September and March of each year, and that comes through RIDE.
So FY 27, you had done 250,000 for HVAC and other improvements under the capital.
Yeah, that was just kind of an estimate. If we were going to do any additional HVAC over and above what we had bid out at that point in time, and I think if I'm not mistaken, we're doing most of the middle school, if I'm correct in that.
Take the south side first,
Yeah.
and work our way this way. Yeah.
I know the older part of the
Build
building.
about a building. Yeah.
We talked about eight classrooms. Is that still, that's,
Eventually, when we're all said and done, it's 8.
Yeah, because we made the presentation, right? And we were able to go with the heat pumps.
right, that's for 8.
Correct.
We had talked about 8 different classrooms.
Yep.
So that's basically 8 classrooms is accounted for in all of your numbers that we're talking about right now.
Right.
It's 500.
Yeah, and I suppose you could do 4 more if we're looking at 250, but I'd have to look at, I think once we complete that project, maybe take a look at cash flows and see what we have. Now, this assumes that we're going to use the 115,000 in next year's budget. Now, I think that there's not a lot of wiggle room in there, but enrollment could change. We could wind up getting a few more tuition students. You could have students dropping out. Again, you could have some additional out-of-district tuitions for special education students. Those things pop up, and they're often difficult to budget for. That's why I'd like to see something closer to a few $100,000 on our general fund, so that we don't have to look at the capital fund as being that fund that we're going to have to tap into it and to meet the operating budget. And what we may want to do, and we've done this at the town side, is that last year we took capital out of the town budget because we really didn't need it, and that hurts you when you miss a year, because generally they were trying to take about $250,000 and charge that to the budget, and then put it over into a capital account similar to what we have here. And then they could, if things come up during the year that you need to spend on capital, then the committee could approve the expenditure out of the capital reserve fund. We still have that option now by having that in there, so that even though some of the projects may or may not be subject to reimbursement under RIDE, we do have the ability to, at the beginning of the year, to look at up to a $500,000 emergency approval, so that if we didn't budget in like we did, it must be like 4 years ago now, we did the 10-year plan. You got that approved by RIDE, so those are all qualified for housing aid reimbursement. And then we wound up committing to doing the HVAC in the library, so that we could get the bonus housing aid numbers on that. So we had to have a contract with, which we have with Studio J to do the work on those so that we can get the extra 10% bonus on those projects. That has since gone, so we don't have any of the bonus numbers. If we go with that 500,000, we'll get the flat 35% reimbursement on some of those. But we do have the ability to do that at the beginning of the year if we have some projects that we think that weren't in our original approval. The original approval was like 4.3 million, but it was fairly flexible because you had one school. A lot of times when you have, like in Lincoln, where I had 5 or 6 schools, you would have to do it by school. So if you wanted to do something in one school and it hadn't been approved, you'd have to go back to RIDE and get authorization to get it transferred. In our case, since it's all in one school, we have kind of a flexible approval on a lot of this stuff too. So we may or may not need the 500,000 emergency approval to get at least a minimum housing aid on these things. So it's been a great fund, and I think that I think the goal would probably to continue to try to fund it. I don't think we have the ability in this year's budget to fund that. Traditionally, I'd like to see maybe at some point we get to a point where we can take 150 or 200,000, put it in our operating fund, and then get that transferred over to capital, so that we can kind of continue to build up that fund. And we've been lucky enough over the last couple of years with the dissolution of these collaboratives to be able to, put that money aside so that we could use it for capital.
I guess the only thing with all of this, John, that we're talking about, basically, we're trying to fill a gap, right? This deficiency projected next year, pulling from a capital account that we're trying to use to save projects, right? I mean, in layman's terms, I mean, basically that's what it comes down to, if I'm right in understanding that.
Well, we do have that. We still have the option of taking it out of the general fund unrestricted reserve. So that's still on the table if we wanted to. We can see how 26 pans out. I mean, if we wind up showing a surplus there, we could probably try to use that as opposed to the capital. But and then we could transfer the 100,000, and we may just do that anyway. Let's take the 100,000 in, let's put it over in the capital for now. We'll leave it over there in the event that we may need it. But going forward, a lot of it's going to depend on, what direction certainly that the school goes into. I mean, if we were to consider a district-owned charter, you're going to see a big increase in tuition revenue that's coming in. So at that point, it's not going to be as significant. If we don't go that route, then we can just kind of look at enrollment and see how that's going to impact operations going forward too. So, but I think we have some options in that regard. But
I guess
so
there's a lot of hypotheticals, right? Of particular, something. And I understand your presentation, and that's your job to do that, right? Your job is to make sure that we have enough money to operate and go forward, right? To cover us.
Well, it's one of my jobs.
Yeah, one of your many hats. I get it. But what I'm saying this respect, I guess the thing that bothers me a little bit here is that we're trying to fill a gap off of monies from previous years, right? And that money from previous years may not always be there going forward, right? So you may not have that ability to do that. So then you got to say, what do we do with that excess that this deficiency that we have, you know? You want to be always banking on something that you may or may not have in your general unrestricted or your capital
Yeah.
to fill
no,
that.
No, I hear you. I hear you. But what we just, I think strategically, what we're looking at in this budget is not making changes and moving forward with what we have right now. And so that without making any significant impact on the operating budget, I think it's going to be necessary for us to do that this year. Going forward, that may be much more difficult to do in 28, depending on how things shake out. But in terms of managing the budget, I think we're going to continue to look at, even though we may have something in the budget right now, things may happen that may allow us to reduce some of those budgeted expenditures without having any particular impact on the school's operations. Of course, Jack and Rosemarie can look at those items as we move forward. But based on the projections that we have right now, I think it's prudent at this point not to make any substantial changes as we move into the, PYP and get that all set up and certified, and we'll have a kind of a good idea going forward what we might have for tuition paying students on an ongoing basis. That number is going to be critical as we move forward, because you have a dip in that, and all of a sudden Tiverton winds up taking back a bunch of students.
Yeah, we lose 50
know,
kids. It's a lot.
Yeah, they're going to have to change directions pretty quickly.
So,
But no, I hear you, Mike, on that. And but whether we take it out of the operating or we take it out of capital, I think you have the flexibility of having both of these being part of the school. So the committee has the ability to kind of manage where we take it from at this point. But
I'm sorry, but you're taking it out of the same basket, whatever basket it may be. You're still taking it out from a previous year's, wherever that funding may have come from, whether it was from the sale of East Bay or whether it was money that was surplus.
Well, for capital, I think it's okay using that, because what you're saying is now we're using one-time monies to fund an operating deficit, and that's always a concern. That was my original intent by taking it out of capital, because now you're not you're basically not impacting operations at this point in time. But I think going forward into next year, we do have, and we know that, for example, this additional pension expense that we're coming in needs to be brought over. So whether that's brought over and we were able to get an increase in our town appropriation above the 3%, that was also a concern. So I still think we have flexibility as we move forward on the budget side, especially in that regard too. So I mean, the town's been very supportive. I don't expect any issues with getting the school budget approved, because I'll have to quit if that's the case. So I'll force their hands. But they've been very supportive. So from that regard. So I don't know, to take 115 out of this year's budget, I think it's going to be difficult.
I guess there's many different ways to look at that, but let me just ask you another question. You talked about bringing more things onto our balance sheet that the town has been covering over the time. You speak to the 65,000 for the fringe benefits, and wasn't there was another item? Oh, I'm sorry, that was for the pension, right? There was
Yeah,
a
pension,
pension.
correct.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. And then there was another piece that you had talked about, and I think it was for non-certified employees at the town was picking up as well. Another expense that you wanted to bring over onto the school that the town had been picked up, they were carrying for us. You recall what the amount was on that?
No, the only item we have is the non-certified pension at this point in time that I'm aware of. We are talking about the potentially merging, or at least utilizing the HR in the school side. And there's some monies that the town's going to reimburse the school for that HR, plus we're going to wind up picking up some of the duties that Carolyn is doing now in terms of payroll processing, which more of a clerk function as well. So we're going to take that off her plate as well. So that's the only other item that's in there. I mean, in the past, they've had some things with buildings and IT and everything else, and that's going by the wayside at this point in time. So that the only other one would be the HR function.
The town. And that would be, there'd be an agreement that's worked out between the town and the school in terms of an understanding of how that position works and time served and coverage and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the particulars is going to be weighed out. I just think it's an opportunity to use Carolyn's talents townwide, which I think will be a benefit for the school as well, too. But also taking away some of her other clerical responsibilities as well.
So how does that affect our budget as far as what, does that drop the percentage that would be charged to the school versus the percentage that gets charged to the town on that line budget item?
Well, we've got an adjustment in there for Carolyn's salary. And then there would be an additional administrative assistant that would be hired at a particular period for the superintendent. And plus the town is going to wind up picking up some of the processing of payroll that Carolyn does right now, so that we're going to have to look at how her resources are going to be utilized between the town and the school. And I think that it's a great opportunity. I mean, I've spoken to Carolyn about it, and I think that based on her education and her ability to handle the HR side, there's a definite need at the town side. And I think that by utilizing her talents at that level on the HR side is going to be a real asset for both the town and the school. So there's not a big financial impact on the school side. The town side, we're adding somewhere in the neighborhood of probably $45,000 or so in costs, because there's some costs in there to help her to automate some of the personnel records, which we'll be doing both for the town and the school, as well as some other items that we need to address. And we're going to add, we currently outsource the payroll to a subcontractor who will now be doing the payroll for both the town and the school. So it'll probably cost another 20 grand per year on the town side.
So right now we're looking at a 3% increase over last year is what you're
Right.
3% on the town appropriation side, if I understand you correctly.
Right.
Any idea on what that 65,000 makes up of that 3%?
Well, so the 3% is going to be what we're requesting.
Right.
The 65 is going to be a direct expense to the school for the pension. So that's going to be
Direct expenses to the school
for the payment of the pension obligation. So the actuary's report has already been prepared for the following year. So that number of 337 is the total expense for both the police, fire, town, and school.
I
And,
guess what.
and based on the actuarial liability for each of those components in the pension, that percentage times the 337, it comes up to the 65,000 that we're looking to fund for the pension expense.
I'm looking at it from a different angle. So if I say at 3%, that's basic, that 3% includes that 65,000, which is a percentage of the 337 on our portion of the pension, if I understand that. Is that correct? That 65,000 is based out of our 3% increase, right?
Well, it's included in that, right?
At 3%. So if we didn't have that increase of the 65,000, our percentage increase would be X. Do you know what that X is?
Well, no, the 3%'s in there, and that's fixed. So that's why we're showing there was initial $50,000 shortfall in the budget from initially with the 3%. Adding the 65, that brings it to the 115. So that 3% doesn't change at all. That stays fixed at this point in time. Now, that's not the case going forward. It may change going into 28 potentially. But at this point in time, what the budget committee was looking at was kind of focusing in on that 3%. So
Yeah, I just looked at it, I'm saying to myself, okay, would we have been at a 2.5% increase if we didn't bring over that expense of the 65,000? But
no, we'd have less of a deficit, I guess, is what we're saying. But we'd still have the 3% in there.
It's not, I know what you're saying, Michael. It's not the windfall.
no, it's not. I mean, it's more of me thinking like, okay, our expenses, our ask went up, say 2% versus 3% based on the number that basically we're bringing over from the town side to the school side. What John's saying is that that's not.
Correct. It's not. It's definitely the deficit. And what we're going to have to pull out of that capital expenditure fund to fund it.
I guess at the end of the day, John, I guess I'm just not in favor of taking money from previous years to fill gaps in our going forward, because that's not budgetary wise or fiscal responsibility wise. I don't think that's a good thing. I mean, should we be using money to fund it so we don't raise taxes on everybody? Yeah, I believe that.
Well, it's also to keep it at the 3%, correct, John? I mean, if we weren't governed by that, we're probably, I mean, first off, our ask would be higher than the 3%. And it would it basically offset Michael's concerns. And I mean, I hear what Michael's saying, but I also hear what John's saying. If we got these two accounts, one of them is for student has a need.
Right.
The other one is, hey, let's put AC in, let's fix the library, let's do this, that, and the other thing. If you got to pull from one of those accounts, first off, it's great that we have money in both. But if you got to pull from one, you got to pull from the extracurricular, if you will, the wants, not necessarily the need pile. Not ideal, but under the circumstances of what you've been instructed to do, I certainly don't want to submit a budget. And I mean, you've certainly constructed it based on your conversation with the council and the budget committee. I wouldn't want to, hey, you guys be at 3%, and then we're coming in there at like 3.62, and they're like, what is this? So not ideal as Michael shared, but you know, we got to do under the circumstances we're presented.
But that can snowball, right? Going next year, again, we have less money to pull from. And we come back next year and say, well, our expenses are, you know, we still have a shortfall. We had a shortfall last year, and you've talked about this, I think, it runs $1 million deficit every year. You know, I mean, we don't want to get into that position.
No,
But we're trying to.
These
Yeah,
conversations and projecting about things like charter school, because we've got to start, I think, thinking creatively, because you're right.
100%. This is, you know, you forget where we've been. Where we're going is every department needs to be creative and thoughtful of how they can prevent the situation we're in, right? Like Michael said, we don't want to be pulling from this fund. And like Amy said, hey, the charter piece, that brings in revenue
Yeah.
that we necessarily would have never been looking at in terms of that type of monies coming in. So if we can think outside the box of how we've always done things, or, you know, I think everybody just needs to put that cap on. And how can you cut costs? How can you create revenue? How can you do consolidation? How can people be shared within the town services? You know, it's a really thoughtful and measured approach that we have to take across all departments to get, you know,
Right.
our town's surplus and capital expenditure to where it can be, to where, you know, we're doing things on, whether it's buildings or tennis courts or whatever the case is.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty much there. I think what's happened in the past is the budgets that the council was looking at initially were the expenditure side, and nobody looked at the revenue. So how are we going to fund this? What they have now is they have a budget similar to yours, where it shows all the revenues that are on there and all the expenses. And, you know, so we had a interesting meeting last week on that budget. So it'll be, some changes are going to be made, but it will be a balanced budget. There's clearly no use of any accumulated surplus. But, you know, I thought that we probably would be able to balance the budget this year. You know, we had a $1 million structural deficit that we dealt with a 12% tax increase. But, you know, I look outside and look at all the snow and look at the snow budget, and that's gone south. So, you know, we're hoping that we can at least recoup some of that. I think with the declaration of the state of emergency, we'll be able to get back some of that money through some federal funding. But you know, it hasn't been easy.
Really a challenge. Does anyone else have questions for John?
Yeah, I'll finish with this. I understand why you're doing it, to cover a deficit. I understand where we're getting it from. I just don't agree with, I'm not sold on that we've hammered down on all of our expenses to get into that practice of taking money from previous years to cover this. And it hasn't been shown to us in that aspect. And I understand why you're doing it. But I think we're going down the wrong road doing that. That's and this is no disrespect to you, John. You're just trying to fill the gaps and make everything work. And I get that, but I'm just saying that I don't think this is the right way, because what if something happens that we do get, you know, one of those out of district placements, and we just took that 115 to fill that gap, and guess what? Now we don't have that extra money that we may have needed to do that. I think that's.
I mean, there's some of that in the budget already in terms of those types of expenses. So that's certainly driving it up. But, you know, we don't want to change what we're doing right now. We seem to be doing it very well, and we're moving over to, you know, the PYP. And ultimately, I think that, you know, this charter thing has to be looked at pretty seriously because in that particular case, you're going to be adding some additional revenues that are going to be needed, I think, going forward.
Yeah, based on the Carolyn sent out. No, but what was the number of total students? 54? You sent an email to all.
Oh, tuition students.
Yeah. You add $10,000 to each of that. I mean, that's another $540,000 that's coming in. That is the kind of creativity we need to pursue to have these types of offsets so that we're not, you know, as Michael said, you know, this is what happens in every community I'm familiar with that has the funds. It ends up being like, if there's a shortfall, you're pulling from it. In communities that don't have the funds, they pull from, they steal from Peter to pay Paul. It's across departments, but the fact that we have the CapEx and the surplus, and we can protect ourselves a little bit under these circumstances and financial times. It's not ideal, to Michael's point, but at the same time, fortunate to be able to not say, so what are we cutting and who are we laying off and how are we going to, negatively impact outcomes? This is something we could float, and then we, continue to stay aggressive with the PYP, and then also the charter, because the state seemed to be receptive of our pursuit of that.
I mean, I don't think that eliminates the continued review of the expenditures on a regular basis too. So if there are areas that we can certainly cut, we're going to continue to look at those. Right now, some of those aren't evident. We could have some changes in enrollment that could create some opportunities for us. And I certainly think that Jack and Rosemary or whoever's sitting in her position we'll look at those things as we move forward. I mean, enrollment changes daily, Jack, as you know. And, it seems to be holding up pretty well. And certainly with the number of tuition paying students, that's kind of helped us out tremendously. This year I was looking at, so somebody asked a question, we got about $95,000 more in state aid. And a lot of that is attributed to the state share. So that state share, which had been at like 8.5%, moved up to 11.2%. So now the state was basically increasing the amount that they were going to give us based on the change in that state share. And that's based on property values. It's based on income for the community. So, and I know that, for example, in Lincoln, it had gone up one year and we had some increase in state aid, and then it wound up coming down the following year. And, it dinged us in terms of state aid. So, that's something they have to look at too, because they have to kind of get some consistency. It's not as big of an issue for Little Compton, because what do we get? 300,000-400,000 tops in state aid.
We've been dinged. Michael, myself, we've been in this room where it's like, I'm sorry, what did they forget about us?
Yeah.
So
the special education, when we took that over in-house, I believe the number was 200,000 that it was going to cost us for special education. Where are we at with that? What are we budgeting for that? Because it was when that whole East Bay and Newport County Regional expanded, this is what we were going to carry, was 200,000 and wouldn't cost us any more. And
yeah,
what are we really at?
We're pretty much at that level. We haven't, there's some additional services that have been added. I mean, if you take, for example, an out-of-district placement, that could have a significant impact on that, because we account for everything in program 20, which is the special ed. When a student has to be placed out of district, it's going to cost quite a bit more money. We do have, for the first time, a out of district, a statewide busing bill that we get for transporting students that most districts had. We've never had that, so there's some additional costs there. So I think the core management of the special education student services has not increased that dramatically from where we were. What we are seeing is if there are increases in services for these students, that will drive the cost up a bit, and conversely bring it down if those services, go away, students graduate, they exit, they move. That changes that number as well too. So
So are we carrying the 200K as a number in our budget to cover those potential expenses plus or minuses depending on services?
well, we've over the years have increased the out of district placement portion of it. So that number is exclusive of what we were looking at for that 200,000, because by bringing that in-house, we still had to pay for out-of-district students when we were with the collaborative anyway. So you've got to kind of separate that as well. So if you pull that out, yeah, we're right at that. We haven't increased that significantly from where we were, and we were paying probably with the Newport County Collaborative, we were probably upwards to 300,000 per year or so on that. So I think it was the way we structured it, with certainly with you need to have a special education director. So we're lucky to get, Mark Dufresne to come in on a part-time basis to handle that. But what you have is oftentimes student services. I mean, certainly the pandemic didn't help us much when that occurred, because that's really added a number of additional services for students. I saw it in Lincoln, maybe not as dramatic here in Little Compton, but still there.
Talking about, so what we can't service, we can say 21, 22, right? 24. I mean, it's going up. And as he said, if they fall, if they, age out, that's one thing, but the need has certainly increased. Any other questions for Mr. McNamee?
So I guess, so those numbers are up and beyond that 200K number.
Right, that's like what comes out of that, like we said, like he was saying, we have that special fund or that general expenditure fund or that surplus where if we get one out of district student, or in case, John tells the story of a family moved to Lincoln and they all needed to be outsourced out to other districts. He goes, it's like a $400,000 hit. So the out of district tuition for special education, like if we can't provide the services here, which I think we have a pretty great grasp on, but there are instances where the need is greater than what we can provide. So we have to account for that. And as John said, since COVID, it has been a challenge for all districts. They've seen that number increase with the need. So yeah,
That number that we were paying Newport County 300,000, is that our 200,000 number that we're doing in-house? The same amount?
Right. Yeah. Those are the basic operating. That would be for any speech and language. Some of the OTPT, we're outsourcing that stuff, so we do have that in the budget. It covers the obviously special ed director. There's a little bit of systems that we need, but not a big number.
So we're doing it a little bit cheaper in-house than we were when we were paying Newport County?
Yeah, we are. I think we're seeing it, the IEPs ticking up a bit. So that's something that will help drive the cost up a bit. But they're managing those caseloads right now pretty efficiently.
John, thank you for your dialogue today, your thoughtful approach. Michael, thank you for your Q&A. Are there any other questions for Mr. McNamee? All right. John, thank you. Rosemary, thank you. John, thank you.
Thank you.
I do, is anybody else logged in?
Nobody else is in, other than Kate.
Okay. Thank you for making.
Where you'd see them with.
No, thank you for making that accommodation. Certainly, this will be on the YouTube channel following our meeting in the coming days. And with that being said, I will consider a motion to approve the 26-27 school budget to be presented to the budget committee, or excuse me, presented to the town council.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We got one, 4, and one against, one opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other than that, I will consider a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for meeting today. Principal McKinnon, those that are in the arena, Tom, Carolyn, Rosemary, thank you so much for all your work this week, and certainly Michael out there. Thank you for coming today. I wasn't sure. We didn't hear from you. I figured it's probably if.
When did you send something out?
No, we just, well, 5:06 came. I go, he's usually not late. I go, but I can understand why he's not here.
I'm gonna close this down, is that all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, have a good night.
Bye.
Have a great night. Thank you.